Hello there, James and everybody else. Tonight I'm going to talk briefly about expanding the collective subconscious, or the collective unconscious as it is also called. This is a part of an ongoing debate that started with James making some videos about sexism and the collective unconscious. Links in the low bar. In my previous video in this series, I addressed only issues about the distinction between the individual level and the social level. James correctly argued that this did not address his main points. He also argued incorrectly that this must mean that I didn't get his message. The reason I addressed only that particular issue about the distinction between individual level and structural level is that I think that this distinction is very important and need to be discussed. It need to be a part of the discussion about the collective subconscious. There are many who try to change the collective subconscious by removing things they don't like from culture. They have this idea that if we remove certain tropes, certain stereotypes from fiction, then they will disappear from real life as well. And that is of course ludicrous, regardless of whether you do it for religion or ideology or some random idea about helping people. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Indeed, it doesn't work that way. James made a good analogy about trying to cure the fear of heights by making the world flat. It doesn't work at all. However, that was not what I was talking about at all in my previous video. I was not talking about diminishing culture. I was not talking about removing things that don't fit the ideology. I was talking about expanding the culture, including new tropes and new variations, making the stereotypes less monolithic, giving us a broader range of alternatives. And I do think that this is a project that do have potential. We can't reshape culture, we can't remodel it by just removing stuff, but we can change it, expand it, and so on. By the way, there are certain things that I do think should not be included in works. Outright bigoted propaganda and such should be, people who make movies and books and so on should be very careful with how they handle that sort of things. So I'm not saying that the people who want to remove certain things are always wrong. I just think that they are mostly wrong most of the time. It is not entirely black and white, but more importantly, criticism is not the same thing as censorship. Criticizing stereotypes and so on, even in a this is wrong, this should be removed kind of manner, is not the same thing as censoring it. And while censorship almost always sucks, criticism can be constructive, even if it's not worded in the most constructive way possible. I do think that we can expand our culture, that we can expand our way of thinking in various ways. One of the things that James claimed is that if we make a game where Link and Zelda are both female, then the one wielding the sword and rescuing the other would still be considered the man. And to some extent, I agree with him, but that character would also still be female. What we get here is, instead of just a message about how boys are and girls are, trapping people in, if you happen to be born with certain genitals, you must take a certain role. Instead of that, we get a message that girls can be boys too, and that's okay. That's a really nice message that I do approve of. We should have that a bit more often. What we should also have, that is sadly far less common, it hardly even exists at all, is that boys can be girls too, and that's okay too. The masculine, the things that are coded as masculine in our culture are generally held in high regard. And, I mean, this is patriarchal culture, and this contributes to the idea that when a woman does something coded as masculine, then that's cool. But when a man does something that is coded feminine, then that is uncool, and he's lowering himself to the level of mere women and such. But this is something we can do away with over time. Another analogy that James uses is that red apples have very different cultural meaning in traditional European culture and traditional Chinese culture. In Europe, they stand for sin and temptation, while in China, they stand for good fortune. Then he makes this thought experiment that we would erase this from the culture somehow, and he argues that people would still have concepts for sin and good fortune. Well, my take on that is, so what? First of all, erasing things from culture, like I said, I don't think it's possible. Anything that has ever been put in there is still there as a part of it. We can't go around removing stuff. It just doesn't work. But we can expand. We can teach people that an apple can have at least two very different meanings. But more importantly, we can give people alternatives for what the concept of good fortune means and what the concept of sin means. Instead of one monolithic meaning for each, we can expand with introducing new twists and new meanings. I don't think it's all just the same story over and over. Of course, to some extent it is nothing new under the sun. But we keep adding new combinations, new nuances, and the cult just keeps on growing, becoming more and more complex, and this is a very good thing. Diversity is something I truly enjoy and invite everybody else to enjoy as well. That doesn't mean that we have to accept anything and everything, but we can broaden the range quite a bit. And that's all I have to say for tonight. Looking forward to continue the debate. Live long and prosper.